Hey guys, it's Jim from V-Strom Garage. Today we're working on the 2015 V-Strom1000. Anyways, we're going to do the chain and sprockets today and just kind of check the bike over and yeah, let's get it done. So we got our new chain. We got the RK525 GXW chain, 116 links. We got a new front countershaft sprocket from JT. It has the rubber dampener, which we'll see later. JT rear sprocket, stock size, 41. Alright guys, first thing I'm going to do is zip tie the clutch lever to the handlebar. That way our clutch lever stays pulled in. Hopefully the zip tie is strong enough. There we go. What that does is it keeps the clutch slave cylinder piston from popping out when you pull that out. Alright, so that's done, so we can go ahead and take the clutch slave cylinder off. Sorry about all the fan noise. We got the air conditioner going, we got the fan going. It's about 109 degrees outside, so we're trying to stay cool. So, okay, so we got our clutch lever all depressed. Now we've got the 5mm Allen wrench, and we'll take these two bolts out of the slave cylinder. Do this evenly. Loosen up one side a little bit and do the other side. One side, the other side. Until they're loose and not coming out. The top bolt's going to be a lot longer than the bottom bolt, and the top bolt has that spacer in there, so don't forget about that. No problem. Yeah, the top one's just a tad bit, barely longer. Move that out a little bit. When you pull it out, this whole rubber piece may pop out. That's okay. Just push it back in there. Then we can set that out of the way. Okay. Then you're gonna let me move the camera. Alright, so we got this in here. I don't know if it's too dark. Let's see. So we got that little spacer that's right there, so we'll go ahead and just get some little needle nose. We'll pull that out of there. Got all the chain lube and stuff on there, so we'll, of course, clean behind the sprocket cover while we get everything apart. Get some old rags. Okay, now we'll go ahead and take I think there's 3 8mm, 3 or 4. I think there's 3 8mm bolts on the countershaft sprocket cover. So on this last bolt, you're going to have a little holder that holds one of the wires. And I don't know if you can see that or not. Anyways, so that bottom left bolt goes through that little thing. Wire. So those 3 bolts are off. Now we can just pull this thing out the way. That's nice and dirty. Not too bad. If you're lubing your chain, you're going to have stuff behind this there. That's just the way it is. And find out what size socket the countershaft sprocket is. And let you guys have a little look behind here. Flex slave cylinder. And we got all the gunk in there from the chain lube. And our sprocket nut is 32 millimeter. So we're gonna go ahead and get that thing loose. We use electric impact, a DeWalt one. But yeah, you want to get this countershaft sprocket nut loose first before you start, you know, cutting the chain or loosening up the rear wheel or anything like that. So yeah, this is probably the hardest part of the whole job, is getting that off. Sometimes I should be able, with this electric impact, I should be able to get it off pretty easy by myself. Sometimes you're gonna have to have somebody hold the brake on the other side while you try to get it off. You don't want to put it in gear and try to do that. You don't want to put all that pressure on the transmission. So yeah, use the brake here. Just take a 2x4 and stick it through the back wheel, and yeah, just keep that thing from spinning. There is red Loctite on these things, so they do come off hard. And once I get everything, start putting everything back together, I'll let you know all the torque specs and everything that's going on. Alright, actually there's a little washer behind there too, so don't lose that. I'm just going to set this on there while I do the rest of it. Alright, next thing we'll go ahead and well, I guess we'll go ahead and cut the chain off next, and then well actually I'm going to loosen up the rear wheel, and then we'll cut the chain and do all that stuff. So I repositioned the rear wheel stand forward a little bit, so got a little room to work now. Loose. We can go ahead and loosen our chain tensioners here too. Yeah, we'll put those in pretty far. Alright, get our safety shield on, we'll grind this sucker off. So we're just going to pick 2 rivets to take off out of here. I colored one with a Sharpie. Not that it really matters, but I said you can do this with a grinder. You can get a Dremel tool. It's going to take a little bit longer. And if you don't have that, worst kind of worst, you can use a file. If you don't have a chain breaker or something. This, of course, the grinder is always the fastest way to do it. Just grind it down so it's just flush with the plate. And do the next one. So we got the two little rivets. You take your flat blade screwdriver, here and there, and just like that. And before you take this chain out, get your other chain out, because we're going to attach it to this and pull it through so we don't have to sit there and try to feed it by hand and all that good stuff. But before we do that, I'm going to clean some of this stuff off so we don't get all that junk into the new chain. So we got everything cleaned up behind the sprocket cover here. So I took the old sprocket off and just let the old chain down like that so I can clean everything in there. So now I'll get the new sprocket. And it's still the old chain. Sprocket, try to get it lined up on it. Go ahead and put our washer back on here. And just hand tighten this. Now just so it doesn't come off. Then we'll take it back off and put the Loctite back on it before we torque it down. Pull the old link out. Attach the new chain to the old chain. And pull the old chain out. So now we'll take the chain off in here. We're going to pull the rear wheel off and change the rear sprocket. So we'll just let those down, out of the way, and put this rear axle on here. We got our nut, the washer. Alright, so now I'm going to take the ABS sensor off the other side, so when I pull the wheel off I don't accidentally hit it and break that off. So that's just a little 8mm bolt on that. I'll take you around the other side and show you that. We're going to be taking that little 8mm nut off there and pulling that sensor out of there before we pull that rear wheel. You can tell because it's right here on the ABS ring. Yeah, take these off the rest of the way, but easy way. Done. It's actually not that worn out. Alright, we'll take a quick break. I'm going to clean all this stuff up. And yeah, then we'll continue. So the rear wheel's all cleaned up. We got a new sprocket. I'm going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on these. Looks like there was a little bit something from the factory. Not going to do as much, but just a little. Maybe more of this coming out quick. We'll zip these on a little bit with a gun and we'll torque them down. They get torqued down to 43.5 foot-pounds. Three and a half. This just like anything else, do these things in a star pattern. Double check. Alright, that's good to go. It's a good time to check your clutch drive and see if your rubbers are getting worn, see if there's any play. There's none in this one, but as they get more miles and age, you'll have the sprocket move a little bit, and then it's time to change the rubbers on the inside. Let's get this rear wheel back on here. Get our spacers in. Grease is still on there from, I haven't really ridden it much since I've got the new tires on. I've just been so busy, that's why I haven't made any videos lately either. But yeah, so everything's still greased up, so I'm good with that. I was trying to get the brake pads lined up in the rotor here. Spacer popped out. Didn't even see it. Hammer under it. Lift this sucker up. All the way through. And don't forget when you're done to make sure you pump up your rear brake, because you won't have any rear brakes until you do. So the thicker, flatter part goes towards the adjuster. Alright, well now we can go ahead and get the chain, get the new master link all riveted on, and yeah, we'll go from there. Just take a quick break. So we're going to go ahead and get our little packet of grease out. We got our little master link with the 2 O-rings on there. Make sure we get a liberal mount on all that. Kind of work that in, all the O-rings on the front and the back side of them, on the inside of the plates and the pins. Get some of that grease into the back side of these holes in the chain, so that way when you push the pins in, it kind of pushes the grease through there. Push this in from the back side. Just a little more grease back there. More grease. And get some grease on the O-rings on the front side. Hopefully it'll hold it in place a little bit. Then we get our outer plate here. And put a little grease on that. And set that up on there. Alright, so what I like to do with this, which you've probably seen in one of the other videos, is get a nut. We'll just pinch these things just to kind of keep it on there so we can get the tool, on there. The phone rings. So that'll kind of hold that on there until we get the press tool in there. So this is where I start using the veneer calipers and kind of see what the factory width is on these. We'll get a rough estimate anyways. Unfortunately, my parquet chain press, the little shaft broke off that goes to the little tool, so I can still use it, but it's hard to keep it centered. Alright, so we got our rivet tool on there, so we'll tighten that up slowly because the thing likes to fall out because it doesn't have the little pin in it. But and if we do it slowly, sometimes it'll be alright. So our goal when we're doing this is there's a certain width the pin has to be. We'll measure it with the calipers, and I believe it's somewhere between 5.45 and 5.65 millimeters is the spread that we want on it. Slide off here. Check that one. Looks like it's flooded plenty, but yeah. It's like a 5.26. So that might need a little more. We'll do the other one real quick, and then well, I don't know how quick. All right, let's tighten this sucker up. Let's check that one. So we're at 529 or 530. Alright, so we'll fire those just a tad more. Yeah, 542. Yeah, that's close enough. There's no way that thing's gonna pop off there. Alright. So that is on. Zip that front sprocket on. Get these pulled out a little bit. So on this bike, what I've noticed, the spec is for the slack in the chains between like an inch, inch and a quarter. But if I do it at the inch or inch and a quarter, once you get on it and sit on it, it's still too tight. So I set it at an inch and a half, and it seems to always be good. That's for my bike. Your bike will probably be a little bit different. Alright, so those are back far enough right now. We'll go ahead and get that front sprocket on, then I'll adjust these all the way. Yeah, it's putting some of the Loctite out of the nut. Alright, so we'll get a little Loctite on there. Get our 2x4 again. So we're going to zip it on with a gun a little bit, and then we'll take it out and we'll torque it to spec, which on this is 83.5 foot-pounds. And let's get an extension for this. Wood here. All right, it is good. Alright, countershaft sprocket is on. Alright, now we can do the slack on the rear. Yeah, it's a little better there. chain slack. Even though it looks loose, I think it's on the tighter side. Might back it off a little bit on each one. Looser. Alright, we'll put our screwdriver in the sprocket, keep the tension on that thing as we tighten it. Pull this off here. Tension on there, we'll go ahead and get this thing going. So we'll get it close and we'll torque it. We'll pump up the rear brakes before I forget. Alright, so let's go ahead and torque this rear axle. It gets torqued down to 72.5 foot-pounds. So we got roughly about 1.5 inches of slack in the chain. Seems like a lot, but like I said, once you get it on the ground and put weight on it, it'll be fairly, won't be tight, but it'll be just right. Alright, so we'll go ahead and lock these 12 millimeters on the adjustment screws. Put a little tension on the 10 millimeter. We'll go ahead and put our ABS sensor back on over here. Alright, that's good to go. Alright, so now we're just going to get the cover put back on and the clutch slave cylinder, and we're pretty much done. Alright, so we got this cover on, we got the 2 bolts in the back on, and we got to put this last one on with a little clip that holds the wire Basically keeps that wire out of the shift shaft. So as you can see, the wire kind of runs around this back side of this, and then runs up. It kind of tucks in behind the cover there. Alright, so we'll snug all these up. Don't have to be very tight. Alright, time for the clutch slave cylinder. Now, a lot of people get to, yeah, that little rubber thing falls out, so make sure you push that back in there. Make sure you don't have any debris on the back side of that, so I can't, oops. It's hard to see, but that's the piston. So you want to make sure there's no dirt. If there's dirt or anything in there, make sure you clean all that off. Alright, so you're going to take your bolt again with your spacer on it. You're going to do that one first. You're going to put your bolt through here. You're going to put your spacer on. And you're going to stick it back in there. Watch the wire. You don't want to get that pinched in there. This bolt, stick that one in there. Get our 5mm back on. Start these by hand. The wire. That's pretty good. It will run right up against it. So we're just going to get this started by hand just a little bit. And then we're going to, that's as far as you want to go right now. Go ahead and clip the zip tie on the clutch lever. Now that we got a little bit of pressure on that thing, the piston of course can't fall out. But like I said in the previous video, or a few videos ago, if you don't do this step, you got a chance of pushing that clutch plate out on the far side and having it kind of turns a little bit, then you go to take off and you don't have any clutch. Again, let's work this back and forth a little bit. torque to 7.5 foot-pounds. So not very tight. There's pressure on them, so they're not loose. Okay. Should be on there. We'll check our clutch. Feel good. Very nice. Alright. Well, that's it for changing the chain on the 2015 V-Strom. That should apply to most of them anyways, of the 1000s. Torque specs are different on the first gen ones. But yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So I'll probably go ahead and bleed the clutch fluid, get some new fluid put in there, and yeah, I still got to check that front fork seal. Hopefully that's no big deal, and get all this stuff cleaned up. Alright, so here's all the tools I ended up using. I got the little side cutters, those are for the zip tie, of course the zip tie. Got the 1/2 inch torque wrench, I got a 1/2 inch breaker bar, got a 3/8 inch smaller torque wrench, we got the gear calipers, sockets we used, I believe is I think we used a 14 for something, 8mm for the bolts on the cover and the ABS sensor. We've got the impact gun for the nut, countershaft sprocket nut. Got the pliers and a little nut to squeeze the plate on the chain. Got some long nose, needle nose. First we got the 1/4 inch ratchet with the 8mm and the 5mm Allen socket. We got some blue Loctite, we got some red Loctite. So blue Loctite for the rear sprocket, and a little bit of red Loctite on the countershaft sprocket nut. We got our flat blade screwdriver to knock the leak off the chain. Of course, we've got the grinder to grind the pins off of the chain. We got a 10 and 12mm wrench. We have the chain press and chain rivet tool there. Just a regular ratchet. We got the chain alignment tool, which that's optional, of course, and hammer. So that's pretty much everything we used on that. I'll run through the torque specs one more time for you guys. The rear sprocket nuts were 43.5 foot-pounds. Rear axle nut is 72.5 foot-pounds. Front sprocket nut 83.5. And yeah, I mean, if you really want to know the specs for the countershaft sprocket cover and the clutch swave cylinder, the front sprocket cover bolts are 8 foot-pounds and the clutch swave cylinder bolts are 7.5 foot-pounds. So that's that. Here's a little close-up of everything here. Master link there. No idea. Kind of see that wire coming down here. Goes on the side of the sleeve cylinder, then down, and gets a little hook on that bolt there. Alright guys, well that's a wrap for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. If you got any comments or anything, leave it down below. Like, share, subscribe, and thanks for watching guys. See you next time.